David McKnight, the author of The Power of Zero, has created a video basically debunking my perspective on Index Universal Life.
There's a popular social media influencer on the prowl by the name of Kirkpatrick, who's been telling a lot of tall tales about Index Universal Life. In today's video, I'm going to debunk those claims one by one.
In this video, he calls me on the prowl, basically positioning me as a predator in this space, which I kind of take issue with. But in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through David McKnight's video, all of his main points, and rather than do just a quick snapshot video where I take a couple points and I make a couple high-level statements that sound really sexy and really exciting, I'm going to actually take some time to dive deeper, because one of the things that I will say out of the gate in this video is that his perspectives are simply perspectives. My perspectives are simply perspectives based on our own experiences, right? So there are facts behind why I believe IUL is misrepresented, and then there are my opinions that I derive based on my professional experience. One of the things that I found really interesting in David's debunking video was that rather than taking the time to go through all my content, or not all of it, but at least a good amount of it, he went through one video and picked 3 of my opinions, right? 3 of my opinions that he decided to debunk based on his own opinions. Now, in this video, I'm going to counter those, but I'm also going to dive deeper, because I think and believe that you have the right and ability to comprehend this all, and you need to understand what you're doing. And so I'm going to go through this, debunk his debunking, and ultimately answer the questions, and then I'm going to dive even deeper into the problems with IUL, where it's misrepresented, and we will go from there. Now, the other thing I want to say before getting going on this is that I have no problem with a live debate. In fact, I have challenged David McKnight to a live debate. He has told me it would be challenging for him. I believe that a debate about Index Universal Life and whole life insurance should be had. I think it should be had on a public forum, and I think it should be done with a live moderator. And the reason I think that is because it's really easy to put videos together, kind of like David put together, where it's like, hey, talking point, edit it up, clip it up, and it's really good. And it's really easy to misinterpret that information. And it's easy to do that when you don't have somebody coming back at you and having to answer the really hard questions from somebody who knows what's going on. And so my challenge, and I'm going to do it again right now, to David McKnight is, I challenge you to a live debate. I will pay for the video guy. I will pay for my flight. I will come to you in Puerto Rico to make life as easy as possible. We will stream it live, and that is the only way I'm going to do this. I will not do it not live. The only way I'm going to do it is to do it live, where we can have a live debate and interface, and we can also take questions and answers from the people who are watching. Now, the one thing I will say is that I believe, David, that you are better than most IUL agents. I will give you credit for that. I think on the scale of agents, and I do believe the biggest problem with Index Universal Life isn't just the product and the companies, it is the agents. The companies themselves are not immune to their own ridicule and their own guilt. What I will say is a lot of the problems that the agents have are created because the companies are implicit in the illicit sales tactics that are happening. In fact, they promote them, and they've constantly fought with regulators over the years, and I'm going to get into that in this video. But what I really encourage everybody to do is to encourage David to debate me. I'm not going away. You came at me, David. I'm not going away now, and I'm going to keep coming until we have a live debate. I have nothing to hide. You should have nothing to hide. The only reason you wouldn't debate me is because you're worried you're going to lose. To me, this should be an opportunity for you to show the world that I'm wrong. So if I'm wrong, let's go. Let's have this debate. If you're so confident, let's do it live. I will cover all the costs, all the expenses. I will come to you, and we will stream this live on all of our platforms, and we will go from there. So that is what I have out of the gate here. Let's get into this. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this video, to this channel. Hit the bell, that way you're notified when I launch a new video, because I got a lot more content coming out. The next video that I'm going to make, in fact, before I get into this video, is on the Allianz top IUL product, right? That I know for a fact, and he says he won't talk about the companies. That Allianz is one of his preferred companies. In fact, in his video, one of the companies that he was referring to is Allianz, and I'm going to cover that. I'm actually going to do a video coming out later this week that goes over that Allianz product page by page, line by line, product, like section by section, index strategy by index strategy. We're going to get into detail because that product is actually full of holes, and one of the reasons that a lot of people sell it is because it's one of the highest compensated product in the IUL industry. I don't think that's a coincidence. So let's get into this. I can't wait. Hey, what's going on, Cashflow hackers? It's Chris, Life 180, and this video, I'm going to debunk the debunking video that David McKnight did about me. So here's the deal. I have my perspectives, as I said in the intro, about Index Universal Life, about whole life insurance, and so this video is going to be going and doing a response to the debunking video that David did about me and my one interview. What I found was really interesting, just kind of out of the gate here. What I thought was really interesting about that video from David was he self-admitted in the comments, because I engaged with him in the comments of his video, and he self-admitted that, hey, I haven't watched, I mean, I'll even put the comment in here, I haven't really watched much of your content. Yet somehow he formulated an opinion that I was an influencer on the prowl and doing all these different things, yet he hasn't watched much of my content. In fact, he admits, like, I pretty much just watched this one video. I've done over 100 videos on IUL. I've got an IUL training playlist that's 70 videos long. He chose to just focus on this one thing, focusing on 3 areas that are my opinion versus his opinion. And so because it is opinion versus opinion, I'm going to go into depth on why I actually formulated my opinion, and I think it's going to make sense. Now, the other thing that he said out of the gate in his video was there's an unsettling trend going on in the life insurance industry where whole life insurance agents and IUL agents are sparring with each other, and whole life agents have, say that, or there's a portion of people like me, myself, that are attacking IUL simply with the goal of tearing down IUL to sell whole life insurance, and basically positioning me as selling index, or as talking against Index Universal Life for the sole purpose of selling whole life insurance. Now, to that point, I feel like I need to give a real explanation about my background. In 2014, I was a director of business development for one of the top IUL companies in the country. I left that company because I could no longer align myself with the product of IUL. When I learned all the things that I teach people on about Index Universal Life, I could no longer be aligned with it. So I left, I went out on my own. I got into a lawsuit with the company. It took about a 2-year period. I won the lawsuit. At the end of the lawsuit, they basically hit me with a thing saying, if you talk about what you learned while you were here, we will destroy you financially. I mean, there was obviously a lot of legal stuff that went with it, but that was the gist of it, was if I did it, and I talked about it, and I talked about all the things that I learned was there that while I was there over the next couple of years, talking about the class action lawsuits that were settled and sealed in arbitration, talked about all the things I learned about why they do it and why they shifted from being a whole life company to an IUL company, all these different things. If I talked about any of that publicly with the purpose of selling life insurance, I would be sued. And so I talked to my wife. I didn't have the ability to ultimately do this and continue selling life insurance and without opening my mouth, without sharing what I believe to be the truth, right? I didn't have that ability, so I decided to take a step back. I let my licenses go, because if I had nothing to gain monetarily from it, I could share my message and they had nothing to do because I had no financial gain from it, so I could actually go out and do it and be protected against lawsuit. And so I gave up my license in 2016. I did it proactively, simply as a way to avoid getting sued, quite frankly. And all the while, I have another business. I run a marketing agency. I'm, ClickFunnels agency. We do a lot of other business development stuff for people in other industries, right? And so I have that company. I decided to focus more on that company, but at the same time, I was dedicated. And by the way, back then, the Life 180 YouTube channel was brand new. I had made a couple videos out of the gate where, and if you go way back to the beginning, you'll notice there was a couple videos out of the gate where I was an agent and I was licensed. And then very quickly it pivoted to, I'm not licensed, I can't sell you anything, and the purpose is just to educate. And from 2016 to 2022, every video that I made was with the purpose of just educating people. It was kind of my pay it forward movement. I had no way to sell policies, no way to monetize, no way to really gain anything except for give people information. I was building my other company on the side. You'll notice that the videos were kind of sporadic. I made them and produced them, created them as I had time and availability to be able to do so. I was simply trying to share with the world what I found out for myself and share the principles and financial concepts that we utilize in our lives to be able to help people. Like I said, it was my pay it forward kind of movement. That's how the Life 180 channel grew. Now, because we gained so much traction and the YouTube channel gained so much traction, and people were drawn to it and drawn to the information because I kind of was like the only one pushing this truth about how all this stuff worked, and being willing to be bold about it and being willing to talk about things in a way that nobody else was talking about, it gained traction. And eventually I had a group of people come to me and say they wanted to start an IMO, and they wanted me to partner with them on it. And after much debate, I decided to do it. And to this point in time, I'm super grateful that I did. But I think it's really important that people understand that I wasn't making this video and I wasn't creating content for IUL or anti-IUL with the purpose of selling whole life insurance. Am I selling whole life insurance now? Well, sure, I am, because I believe in it. And I think it should be a core foundational asset for every single person in this world if they get their finances in order. So that is the case. But to position it as if that is the only reason I was creating this content is super misguided, super misunderstood. And I think people need to understand that kind of core foundational background before casting any judgments, if you will. And so what I'm gonna do now is I wanna get into the actual video. I wanna get into David and his debunking. I wanna go through the topics, and I wanna give a response to them and go through some of the facts, some of the opinions, how I drew my opinions, and how I kind of came to my opinions and conclusions, and why I share them so passionately on the internet. Now, let's just go. Let's just get right into this. You can see on the background here, I've got my whiteboard, my vibe board, and I love this thing. I've taken some notes. It's gonna help me kind of organize the conversation and help me have more of a conversation with you about this, because like I said, I don't want this to be just like these little quick cuts. That's not my style. I want to do more of a deep dive. And so let's just do the first thing here. Now, David said that one of the biggest problems with my argument and core foundational issues with my argument about is the fact that I said life insurance companies started selling Index Universal Life as a way to shift risk from the insurance company to the insured, because interest rates were at an all-time low rate environment. And the actuaries saw that this was going to keep going, which, by the way, it did. And they saw that, so they wanted to create and sell IUL more as a way to shift risk from the insurance company to the policyholder to insulate their portfolio, their general fund, and to make sure that they were able to meet the guarantees that they had already sold. Now, I stand by this. And he says that I am wrong because of the fact that, well, Northwestern Mutual, Mass Mutual, and New York Life, three of the biggest whole life insurance companies, didn't do it. And because they didn't sell IUL, I must be absolutely wrong. And he kind of positions it like this blanket statement that, well, duh, that must be obvious. If Chris were right, these companies would sell it. Well, I would argue that there's a lot of companies that don't sell IUL that are mutual companies at this point in time. I could list off a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through the list of companies right now. But there are a bunch of companies that we could go through that do not sell IUL. The fact that they don't sell IUL doesn't mean that the reason these other companies did it isn't viable. It simply means that those companies understand their culture, understand the purpose, understand what their role is in the financial industry, and they didn't take the easy way out. So I actually have more respect for the companies that decided to just realize who they are, what they stood for, the problems that they solved in the marketplace, who they were trying to help, how they were trying to help them, and what they do best, and they doubled down on it, and that's what those mutual companies did. Now, it's easy to look at the market right now in 2023. It's easy to look at the market today and look at the 70-ish companies, 70 or so companies that are selling Index Universal Life and say, wow, most of those companies are stock companies. Now, there are some mutual companies, Pac Life, National Life Group, Penn Mutual, that sell Index Universal Life. Whether or not they're a stock company or a mutual company, it's important to understand that the responsibilities and the alliance and allegiance to the success that the insurance companies have and who they're beholden to that success for is either the shareholders, or if they're a mutual company, it's to the people and the policyholders that have the guaranteed products. And so to think that that's not happening on some level is a bit delusional, in my opinion. Now, one of the things that I want to say is like, okay, I acknowledge most of the companies now, his statement to this was most of the companies right now are not even mutual that sell IUL. Well, once again, this is a different conversation. Yes, the Index Universal Life market grew, and more companies have entered that market because they saw an opportunity. Those are mostly stock companies because they see it as a cash cow, because IUL is the most profitable product for life insurance companies to sell. Just go look at the books. And so there's that. That's a different story than why did they start to sell them in the first place? And this is where the disconnect is for most people. So what I want to do is I'm going to share my board really quickly. I'm going to go back through this, and I have this is really, I think people are going to find this quite fascinating. So you can see here I have notes, right? So I just want to keep this really clean, and you can see that, you know, David says I'm wrong about IUL companies doing the shift, right? Doing it to shift risk. His claim is because Northwestern Mutual, Mass, and Guardian didn't do it, I'm wrong. IUL took off in the .com bubble, he says, which is wrong. He says it took off in the .com bubble. It was created in 1997, and I'm going to show you it actually took off in 2009. And the guaranteed floor was the perfect antidote to the .com bubble. That's what he says. Now, here's the bottom line. I want you to look at this chart right here, okay? This is something that just goes to show, this is a chart showing market share of life insurance product sales, right? So you can see we got whole life, UL, VUL, and IUL. And you can see right here, 2009, IUL had virtually no market share until 2009. And then finally, it started climbing up and heading that way. Now, whole life, obviously back in the 70s, had a huge percentage of market share. It went down, it's gone up. You could see UL got really popularized and it went up, and now it's gone down with the rise of IUL and the fall of the fixed kind of crediting strategy that goes along and follows Universal Life. And then VUL has had its own wave, right, of like what it's done. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's a lower. But IUL is definitely far and away the fastest growing vehicle in the world right now. But you can look back here, IUL had virtually no market share in the .com bubble. It was created in 1997 right here. It had no market share. And there's a difference between understanding why companies started selling it and what made the product become popularized and what made it take off. I'm not going to dispute the fact that in 2009, there was the financial crisis, in that the story of upside potential and downside protection didn't connect with people. It absolutely did. I was selling it. That's when I joined the industry, was at that point in time. That's one of the reasons I joined and started selling IULs, because I bought the story. I drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and believed that, hey, if this product can give upside potential and downside protection, well then heck, it's got to be amazing, right? It's got to be, it's this magical thing. They've figured out a way to manage it and to be able to give people some upside potential and kind of curb the downside risk. So this has got to be this magical thing that is going to help solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. And that is why I started selling it, and I got disappointed from it. But don't be mistaken between what I'm saying and what he's saying. He's saying they created it, and what popularized it, and I'm literally taking the words out of his video, it took off in the .com bubble. It did not take off in the .com bubble. It had virtually no market share in .com bubble. What we need to do now is we need to say, like, let's go back to what I was saying before. He says I'm wrong because of Northwestern Mutual, Mass, and Guardian not selling it. Okay. Well, let's go down here. I want to have this conversation. IUL was created in 1997, right? Now you can see here, back in 2011, while there are 70 companies selling IUL right now, back in 2011, there were 14 companies selling IUL. 14. I remember sitting in meetings with National Life and having the conversations about all the top competitors. National Life kind of pivoted back then between number 3 and number 4. Pac Life was the dominant force at that time, but it's important to look at. So the question is, how and why did I derive my opinion that life insurance companies started selling IUL as a way to shift risk from the insurance company to the insured? And why did I come to that conclusion? Well, first off, it came initially from a conversation with some of the leaders and actuaries at National Life Group. That's what I did. In those conversations, I started digging deeper and I started looking and I started saying, all right, who are the big players right now in the IUL space? Who are they? Now, granted, National Life to this day, still mutual held company. Pac Life, still mutual company. Penn Mutual, still a mutual company. But these other companies that were big players in the IUL space, John Hancock, demutualized in 1999 and joined the IUL space. So they demutualized in 1999. And when was IUL created again? 1997. Prudential demutualized 2001. Minnesota Life, big player in the IUL space, demutualized in 2005. MetLife demutualized 2001. Principal Life demutualized 2001. So right now, when we look at the world in 2023 and we see, hey, there's 70 or so companies selling IUL, most of them are stock companies, we have to look at not what does the market look like today, but how is the market actually built, right? And when we look at how the market was actually built and we go back and we go, oh, out of 14 companies in 2011 that were selling them, and as it started to gain traction, look at this list. How many companies? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the 14 companies either were selling it and being leaders in the space or demutualized to shift their focus from the policyholders to becoming a stock company, so they're beholden to the shareholders, not the policyholders, so they needed to create profit and shift that risk from them to the policyholder in order to do so. And I don't know about you, but I look at this list and it's like, wow, okay, now we got 70-ish companies doing this, but back then with only 14, with like 65-something% of the market that like basically built this industry, it becomes a no-brainer. So what to draw my conclusion. And so when we look at this and we go, okay, it's not disputable that IULs became popularized. This is a LIMRA, you can see here it's a LIMRA report, right, in 2018. It's not disputable that IUL became popularized in 2019 because of the story of upside potential and downside protection. That's just a sales conversation. It's not really what they do, right? When you look at an illustration, Mutual of Omaha, in one of their illustrations says it very plainly. It's like when we say upside potential and downside protection, we're not talking about upside potential because of market, like because you're gonna like have all this upside because of the market. It's just upside potential in relation to traditional universal life. And that is the spirit. But of course, then wholesalers and marketing people and salespeople get a hold of these concepts and then they turn them into sales machines and then they wind up selling a ton of stuff and a ton of product, and it gains popularity and people don't know what they don't know. And so then we go down that rabbit hole and it is what it is. Now that right there, if you look at that list and you look at the list of companies that were actually leading the charge on building the index universal life market back in 2009, 10, 11, when it became popularized, and the companies that were selling it beforehand that were really pushing the charge, that were demutualizing and going through that whole process, which their whole philosophy, their whole fundamental shift and core values shifted from looking after the best interests of the policy holders, which were basically shareholders. They were the shareholders, because make no mistake about it, when you are a policyholder with a participating mutually held life insurance company with a whole life policy, you are effectively a shareholder participating in the profits through the payment of a dividend with that company. As soon as they demutualize, as soon as you get into an IUL, you are no longer in that position, right? Even with a company like Penn Mutual, just as an example. Not going to say anything bad about them specifically because I think they're a great company overall. But if you had an IUL with Penn Mutual, And I'm not saying they're going to sabotage your IUL either. I don't want it to come off as I'm trying to say that, but I am saying they have a product with guarantees that are the policyholders are going to participate in the success and the profits of that company. And then they have an IUL where you can participate in an index through the participation of a UL product with an option strategy attached to it. And there's a lot of variables that are going to lead to the success or failure of that product. And at the end of the day, the life insurance company is in control of the results of that product. Doesn't matter what company it is, that is the foundational belief. So if that company has an obligation to either its shareholders or its policyholders as a mutual company, that company is going to do whatever it has to do to make sure that these people are taken care of. The shareholders and the policyholders are taken care of first, because that is who their alliance and allegiance and who they're beholden to for success. At the end of the day, the shareholders are going to get the policyholders are going to get the short end of the stick if it comes down to that. Now, will it come down to that? Nobody knows. I'm not one of those people that says, oh, IULs are horrible because the guarantees are so bad. I don't think you're ever going to have to rely on a guaranteed column of an IUL illustration. But at the same time, to stay on point with this topic, because I have a tendency to rant a little bit, when David McKnight makes his comment like, I'm wrong because Mass, Northwestern Mutual, and New York Life don't sell IULs, that's a half-baked line of thinking that's not even well thought out, and it shows me that he doesn't really fully understand the history of IULs, hasn't gone down that path, maybe thought about it that way, and so my hope is he even sees this and goes, oh, hey, maybe I have something to learn here. And you know, when I look at the history and we look at the trajectory that like was the springboard to take it off, to take this industry off, and realize that a lot of companies have joined. Companies like Mutual of Omaha have joined the IUL space and moved away from the whole life space. Nationwide has become a huge player in the IUL space. Like, these are new companies. Symetra has joined. Like, these are companies that have joined the IUL space, and they're stock companies, and they are, you know, they're just doing what they're doing, right? Like, they're taking advantage of a market that was built and that had traction and that gained popularity through a transition. And of course, if their goal is to be profitable for their shareholders and they see an opportunity with a product that's profitable, they're going to join it, right? And so that is why I came to that conclusion. You can decide who you believe, whether you want to believe David and say, oh, well, of course Chris is wrong. Life insurance companies didn't do that, because if life insurance companies started selling IUL because of the fact that Northwestern Mutual, Mass, and Guardian and New York Life don't sell IULs, so therefore that can't be the reason mutual companies started doing this, or life insurance companies started doing this to shift the risk, versus like looking at the real facts of the companies that demutualized, that made the shift, that were the leading charge of IUL. I'm going to leave that to you to decide. I'm not going to try to convince you anything else. I just want you to simply understand how and why I drew my conclusion. All right, so the next statement, I want to actually have you listen to David's kind of claim in debunking of me, because I think it's really important to hear it from his mouth. I want you to hear the points that he's trying to make, and then once you watch this, I'll come back and answer it. The most I could have earned right now is 6.5%. So why is that? Because they use a 12.5% to get you in, or whatever the high cap rate is to get you in, and then they reduce them as your contract matures. And legally, if you look at the contract, they have the ability to do so. They're allowed. And what is criminal to me is a life insurance company doesn't have to publicize what the current cap rates are of older generation products unless they're currently marketing and selling them. So what they do is they go, here's generation 1 index universal life, 12% cap rate. They sell it for 3 years. That runs its rate. That cap rate is high because that's a marketing expense, right? Then they launch generation 2. As soon as they launch generation 2, cap rate is the same high, and they add a couple extra features to make it look really attractive and say, hey, we just improved it, right? And then while they do that, meanwhile, all the generation 1 cap rates start coming down.
Okay, let me summarize the allegation here. IUL carriers lure you in with a high cap rate, and once you're in the program, they systematically lower your cap rate so that they can keep all the profits for themselves. After all, they need all those profits to prop up their floundering whole life policies. or so the story goes. What's worse, they feel like they can do this because they aren't required to publicly disclose their cap rates, and the unsuspecting consumer is all the worse for it.
All right, so as you can see there, David is basically saying that I am stating, which is not true, that life insurance companies lure you in with high cap rates with the purpose of reducing cap rates on you over time, with the intent of keeping that money for their own profit, to separate you from that profit. And that is, the unsuspecting consumer is none the more aware, and therefore they're kind of a victim, and he's positioning it like that. And they're doing this with the idea of trying to support their whole life policies, right? Like that's what he's looking at it like. And I just kind of talked about this a little bit in the last point, where it's not just a matter of supporting the whole life policies, it's about profitability. It's about who is their alliance and allegiance, to as a company. It's to the shareholders and the policyholders of the whole life company, even a stock company. That is the case. Now, what I want to say is I'm gonna clarify my position on this because I think it's really important. First and foremost, I want to do a couple things because actually before I go to the board, one of the things I think is important with David is he then goes on to state, well, all life insurance companies have a track record and they have history to show you the success and the actual results that their IULs have had since the beginning of when they started selling them. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the board, just kind of get to my notes here real quick, because I think it's important. And I took notes on this point here, and you can see here that he says in number 3 here, IUL cap rates are manipulated and they're not reduced because his companies show that the illustrated example. And you can go watch his video if you want to do it. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now. And he shows that his company, by the way, the image that he showed is a marketing piece from a company called Allianz. And it's for their top product right now. It's one of the top products being sold in the index universal life space as far as market share goes. And they show that their policyholders have had a 7.09% average return since 2006. That's over the over a 15-year period. Now, so I got a couple things to this. If 7.09% right now looks really good, my question then goes, why is it 7.09%? And if that is still so good and you're so confident, why haven't you, David, submitted to the IUL challenge? Why don't you have policies that have outperformed the illustrated rates, right? Why don't you have policies that have outperformed and that you could come to me and show me how well they've performed and how they've outperformed how they were sold? Because if they were sold on upside potential and downside protection, well, we just came through the greatest bull run of all time in the market, right? We did. There's no disputing that. That's a fact. So if we just came through the greatest bull run of all time, and these numbers that they're illustrated on are conservative, so to speak, or reasonable or realistic, then it seems to me that every policy sold from 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13 should be outperforming the way that they were sold on the illustration. Because if you're going to get upside potential, well, you've got to participate in that upside, right? And if you participated in the upside, well, then the policy would have outperformed this conservative illustration that was sold to the client, right? So, but the problem is that is not what happens. This is why I created the IUL challenge here. The IUL challenge is really simple, and I'm going to call every IUL agent to it. Show me a policy that's 10 years old that is outperforming, or is at least just matching the original illustration that it was sold 10 years ago. If you can show me that, I will give you $1,000. I will bring you on my channel. I will interview you. I will tell you I believe it's possible, but I believe you have to have done certain things in the policy to make it work. And there's to me, this is the systemic problem. I didn't create the IUL challenge to try to make a point and say, hey, no agent is going to be able to do this, although no agent has done it to this point in time. My point was to show 99% of the policies that are out there in force with IUL are having challenges, they're having problems, they're not meeting expectations, and they're not meeting expectations during the greatest bull run of all time, which if they didn't take advantage of upside potential in that market, now we have to sit back and say, well, why is that the case, right? And we have to go, okay, holy cow, what's going on? Well, 7.09%, let's take a look at that. First of all, that is a gross crediting rate, not a real return in the policy. That is a crediting rate. You have to back out all the admin fees, charges, cost of insurance, all that stuff after that. Now, it's important to also understand that the S&P did 10.21% during that same time frame. That's another thing, another reason. Like I said, the bull run kind of propped up IULs because we didn't have a lot of bad years. We didn't have a lot of down years. And so it made it really good. So the S&P doing 10.21% during that time frame helps bolster things. And by the way, this 10.21% was including 2008 where it was negative 30 whatever percent, right? So it's important to understand that. The other component to this is that from 2006 to 2011, cap rates were 15.5 to 16.5%, right? So if cap rates were 15.5 to 16.5%, well, of course, this 7.09% is going to be bolstered by this inflated cap rate number. Now, back then, actuaries, and I've interviewed Bobby Samuelson on this, he said that back then, a lot of actuaries at some of these companies would state the fact that they could never see an environment where cap rates would be under 10%. They just couldn't visualize it. And so what happened was, of course, these numbers are bolstered because from 2006 to 2011, actually, I would say even 2014, but 2011, fairly enough, cap rates started coming down. And I remember, I was in the industry at the time, and I remember when cap rates went from 16 all the way down to like 13 and then down to 12.5. And that was what it was. And when I left the IUL space, they were at about 12.5. When I stopped selling them, I should say. And so those high cap rates helped produce a higher return because there was more participation in the market. Now the question is, why during the bull market did cap rates go down? It's not because the life insurance company was trying to take your money from you and be more profitable. That's not how it works. Because it's important to understand, here's the deal. This is really, I think, an important point to make. Life insurance companies are dealing with an options budget and an options strategy, right? Actually, I'm going to draw this out on the board, actually, now that I think about it. They're dealing IUL equals a UL plus an options strategy attached to it, right? That's it. That's it. So if you were to go to an IUL and you were to choose the fixed strategy, the fixed crediting rate, you basically have a traditional UL. That's all it is. So the only reason it's an IUL is because you're attaching an option strategy to it. So what does that look like? So you take your money, you give it to the insurance company, right? They take that, they put it into their general fund, right? Then they take that and it gets a return. Let's call it 4.5%, right? For the general fund. They take that, they create an options budget, and then they go buy call options in an index. Now, the reason that the cap rates and everything have gone down is because there's two factors that go in to how companies price out their cap rates and what their participation rates and what their spread charges and all these different things are. And so what that is it's the interest rates, the fixed market, basically, because that impacts the general fund. So it's interest rate / general fund performance, right? So that is one part of it. And so that will help create the options budget. And then it's options cost, the actual options market dictate that. So what happened in 2011 through 2019, or pretty much 2020, right? Options costs kept going up. There was more volatility. There was a lot of things, and interest rates kept coming down, and it was the perfect storm. So that's why we are where we are with indexing. Now, are insurance companies doing this systematically to try to screw the policyholders? Are they trying to steal from the policyholders for their own profitability? The answer is no. No, they're not doing it. That is not what I'm saying. That is not what I said. That is not what I ever said. You can take a little clip from one video without doing a lot of research. Maybe you could surmise that for yourself. But the bottom line is there's way more to the story. Life insurance companies have to lower cap rates, have to lower the performance of the policy simply because the market dictates that they do so. It's not creating more profit for them. When they lower your cap rates in your policy, they're not creating more profit for themselves. That's not how it works. However, where the life insurance companies are a bit nefarious when it comes to this, to use David's word, is the fact that they are aware of the market. They are aware of what's happening. And what happens is life insurance companies do offer new products with higher cap rates that they know they're not going to be able to maintain those cap rates. They have a marketing expense associated with those cap rates as a way to push products to be able to make them illustrate better. And this is one of the areas that regulation change is coming and has been kind of being updated over and over and over again. And so to show this, what I want to do is kind of take a look back at the history of IUL and look at the regulatory changes, and then look at how the life insurance companies are implicit in these illicit sales tactics that they have going on. And like I said, a lot of the problems that I have are agents that don't understand this, and they're selling stuff that they don't understand. But quite frankly, the reason that they don't understand or misunderstand what they're doing is because life insurance companies are the problem here. They just push these half-truth information, and they're constantly fighting with regulators to make their policies look better than they're actually going to perform. And it, the question is, why would they do that? And in fact, I've got an interview with Bobby Samuelson. I'll put on the end screen where I talk about all this stuff in great depth. I would encourage everybody to go watch it because I think it's really, really powerful stuff. And I would also say everybody should go subscribe to the Life Product Review with Bobby Samuelson, because he is the best in the industry when it comes to explaining all this stuff. He does a better job doing a product breakdown of how it really actually works. Obviously, I've got a pony in the race. David McKnight's got a pony in the race. Bobby Samuelson is a third party, doesn't have a horse in the race at all, right? Like, he just looks at products. He's agnostic, but he says what's what when it comes to everything. And it's interesting because he's done breakdowns on the Allianz product that David McKnight likes to sell, that David McKnight says in his video, uses as an example to debunk my perspective. Bobby Samuelson does a whole blog post on that specific product and just pokes a ton of holes in it. And I'm actually going to be doing a review of that policy, like I said at the beginning of the video, in the next week, just showing the breakdown and how it's a bunch of smoke and mirrors with what they do there, right? And so what I want to do now, though, is I want to get over here into the regulatory history, right? I'm going to go back to the board, and I did this. I'm going to go over here and say, okay, so let's go down to here. And in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think it's important to understand that there was a lot. It was basically the IUL industry was kind of like the wild, wild west. People were able to illustrate positive 4% arbitrage on policies. It would show you could put $100,000 into a policy and get $13 million out for income. It was absolutely insane. And the reason you could do this is because when you can show positive 4% arbitrage on policy loans for income and retirement, you can show just astronomical numbers, and it shows uninterrupted compounding growth, and it's unrealistic and it's not how it works. Yet at the same time, you'd read the disclaimers on the illustration, it'd tell you, while it's showing you all this income and all these like pie in the sky numbers, it would also make a little disclaimer and a statement saying taking policy loans greatly increases the chance of this policy lapsing, puts you at risk, and there's a great chance you're going to have to put more money in to keep this policy in force. So finally, in 2015, what regulators did is they came up with what's called Regulation AG 49. Now, in Regulation AG 49, I'm going to go to the board here so you can see it, you can see here that AG 49, they had the use, and they created the use of historical hypothetical look-back methodology to determine the illustrated rates. Now, what was that like? So basically they said, all right, if we're going to create illustrations, we need to utilize some kind of look-back period to figure out, okay, what are we going to be illustrating these as? They decided on a 25-year look-back benchmark was kind of the rules on how the illustrations were going to be made. The rates were going to be based on a 25-year look-back period. So let's just say it's the S&P 500 index. You look back 25 years, and that plays into the consideration. They assumed current rates on the illustrations, whatever the current rates were for cap rates and participation rates. They assumed that you would run the illustrations with the current assumptions. And it wasn't going to take into consideration the fact that par rates and cap rates could be reduced. And it reduced loan arbitrage, positive loan arbitrage, to 1%. So at the end of the day, Regulation AG 49 was actually kind of a win, right? Because it reined in the wild, wild west. It set some parameters in play, eliminated the ability to illustrate monstrous arbitrage. It reduced it to 1%. But there were still some flaws, right? And so what happened was, because of all this, a lot of companies went out and they started doing products like with multipliers and other elements in the policies that I'm not going to get into, but it's important to understand. And I've got a lot of videos on this, by the way. So if you want, I've got interviews with Bobby Samuelson. Check them out. I'll put a playlist at the end of this video. If you want to watch that, I would encourage to watch all my interviews with Bobby Samuelson that break this stuff down in much more depth. Now, the good news about this is that when they they were able to reduce the positive arbitrage to 1%. So it made the illustrations a little bit more realistic, but they still weren't realistic. And the important part to note here is that in 2015, this is when the regulation battle with the carriers and the regulators actually started happening, because this is when the regulations made it so the illustrations didn't illustrate the way that the carriers wanted to. They weren't going to be as competitive. What happened was they started creating things like multipliers and other features like I was just talking about. And so then we have this period of time where multipliers, and this is where Pac Life just kind of dominated the market. They led the charge in that space, and they did amazingly as far as sales go, but unfortunately their policies underperformed, right? And so policy holders were left hurting and left wanting, so to speak. There was tons of class action lawsuits, tons of problems in the space. Now, what happened in 2020, at the end of 2020, Regulation AG 49 was updated to Regulation AG 49A, right? And so this is where they said, all right, we're gonna have to do some things. We're gonna add in and force the carriers to have a defined hedge budget, meaning this is their options budget. Hedging budget is an options budget, because if you understand how life insurance companies participate in options to participate in the index, they're not doing it. A lot of people, I think, have a correlation with options as like a high potential return, but the pure way of using options is as a hedging strategy. And if you understand the term hedging, you understand that there's not really a lot of upside in hedging. The purpose of hedging is to mitigate risk, right? Like that is the purpose of it. So then they also had to define the supplemental hedge budget. They had to allow, and this is where it got interesting. So they thought they were doing something good, but it ended up being negative, because they allowed the use of hypothetical benchmark indexes. What these are, this is the proprietary indexes, or what Bobby Samuelson calls engineered indexes, right? So that is when you use these hypothetical indexes, you can create indexes that have no real history, but you could do hypothetical back testing on them that would allow me to basically look back in time and create an index with all the best stocks in it that performed a certain way, right? And then I could look forward, and just because past performance does not indicate future success, right? We look at that, and that's what we all know that's what the insurance companies are doing to get higher rates. And if you look at the index options on any policy with any company, whenever they're utilizing a hypothetical proprietary index with a look back, you'll notice that the rates are higher and that it will illustrate higher. And so that is why, I don't understand why they had to do this. I think it was a concession, but they did it. And now you'll see that is how companies are setting max illustrated rates. And then the other good thing they did in 2020, because they once again kept having problems with the arbitrage conversation for illustrations, is they reduced the positive arbitrage for illustrations to 50 basis points, or 0.5%. Now, finally, we hit 2023. We have AG 49A is getting updated. Bobby Samuelson is kind of affectionately calling it AG 49B. He's assuming they're going to call it that. They may call it something else, but for the sake of this argument, let's just call it AG 49B. And one of the things that they're doing is that, Bobby was telling me, and once again, I encourage everybody to go watch my interview with Bobby. I encourage everybody to go subscribe to Life Product Review, because he is a third-party source that will educate you on all this stuff in a much, much more in-depth way. If you like the written form of a blog to really study it, he is amazing. So income on the policies of engineered indexes, Bobby says, are going to be reduced by 50%. That is the crux of everything. So a lot of the people, for instance, with these Allianz policies, they use engineered indexes. They have illustrated rates that are going to be super high. It is going to be impacted by up to 50% reduction in income rates at the end. Why are they doing that? They're not doing it because the policies are not like perform awesomely. They're doing this because they're trying to rein the illustrations back to a place that is more in line with reality. You can see they've been fighting this for 7 years now, and I'll say even a decade, because they were trying for a couple of years to get AG 49 in place. So for nearly a decade, they've been fighting this, and every time they launch a new regulation, carriers create elements of the policy that kind of sidestep the regulatory changes in the illustration law. They create, because they got really smart actuaries, really smart math people that get around it to make them look really sexy, but they go against the spirit of the nature when you add in some of these features of what an IUL is with the upside potential, downside protection. You add things in like multipliers to an IUL, that adds a little upside potential, but it also adds in and injects more risk into the policy, which increases the chance of the policy not working, right? And ultimately lapsing. So that's a problem. They're also eliminating arbitrage on AG 49B. That is going to be, it's just due to the fact that it's injecting risk into the policy loans, right? With IUL, they're eliminating the ability to illustrate positive arbitrage, which I think is an extreme benefit and just transparency, because the bottom line is most people don't realize that when you take loans against your policy in retirement with an IUL, with a variable loan, if it's a 4%, 5% loan, whatever it is, on down years, if you have 2 or 3 bad down years when you have income out or when you have loans against the policy, that will compound against you when you put in the additional cost of insurance fees that go with that on down years. It winds up compounding against you, and that's how these policies run into massive problems. So I always say IULs, they're not necessarily going to look really bad or perform poorly. You're not going to be at great risk with an IUL until you hit retirement and start taking retirement income. But for most people, that's why, well, let me put it this way. That's why I always say I have no problem with IUL inherently as a product if you wanted it for a permanent death benefit and you funded it properly and utilized it properly. But the problem is people buy them for retirement income as a main stream of retirement income, you know, while you're older. And in that period of time, that is when there is more risk in these policies than any other time. And so, you know, it's just, that's why they're making these changes, because of all the problems that they've seen. So the benefits of bonuses and multipliers are going to be reduced. Now, I also did an interview with Bobby where he talks about this, and he actually has a great blog on this, on where he thinks life insurance companies are going to pivot and how he thinks they're going to sidestep the new regulation to once again make their illustrations sexier. So we can only deal with, and regulators can only deal with the problems that are that they're aware of right now, that are at hand right now, that are in the market. They can address those problems. Unfortunately, regulators, like all things in government, they're not necessarily the most proactive, or they don't have the most foresight when it comes to being critical thinking and thinking ahead on this stuff. And they're just doing the best that they can do. My guess is this isn't going to be the last regulation. And my ultimate concern, and what, you know, when people ask me, Chris, why do you rant against IUL so much? Why do you rant against IUL so much? Why do you have to create so much content hating on IUL? It's because I believe in the power of permanent life insurance. I believe in the power of cash value, specifically whole life insurance, and what it can do for you as a cornerstone asset in your, if you utilize it as a foundation of your life. The problem is when all this is playing out the way that I'm showing you, the challenge with this becomes the regulators are not going to separate whole life from IUL. And what's going to happen is, and by the way, I'm not going to say that some whole life people are not bad actors as well, and they're not misrepresenting positive arbitrage, and a lot of infinite banking people do the same thing, and I rip on them just as much, by the way, because it's understanding the products and what problems they solve and leveraging them accordingly to the strength of the insurance companies. Insurance companies cannot get massive returns. If they could do it for you on a safe basis, they'd be doing it for themselves, and they can't and they don't, so they won't. So just, I always kind of say, when you utilize common sense, the whole IUL story goes out the window, right? It just does. It just doesn't make any sense. And so the reason I love whole life insurance is because of what it does for you as a savings alternative, what it can be for a volatility buffer. Life insurance should never be the main stream of income or a stream of income that you utilize and lean on every single year in retirement, unless it's a wildly overfunded policy, right? And you're taking incremental, like small relative portions of that income. Now, it is great as a volatility buffer. It is great to utilize for real estate investing or a business fund or something of that nature. But for every year income in retirement, an IUL is going to be extremely dangerous because of the ups and downs of the market, the longevity risk, and all these things that come into play. And the fact that if you're never going to pay back those loans, they will compound against you. And on negative years, the cost of insurance will go up, the cost of loans will go up, and it all compounds against you. This is it. My concern is the regulation changes as they keep attacking, going after IUL. Those regulation changes, the regulators are not going to differentiate between IUL and whole life. And so with that said, it's going to wind up having a massive negative impact on an industry that built an amazing reputation over a 160-year period before IULs existed. And now IULs bastardize the conversation, essentially, of all the good that whole life built. And for 20 years, we have a history now of IULs underperforming their promises. Now, I know a lot of agents out there are listening to me and saying, oh, Chris, there's no way you're right. I cannot tell you how many comments I see, even in the David McKnight video here, saying, oh, you know, I've been selling IULs and my history says otherwise. Okay, if your history says otherwise, send me a policy, win the IUL challenge. I'll give you $1,000. I'll give you a pat on the back. I'll interview you. I'll give you free marketing and free exposure. And you'll win. Like, if you can do it, it's like put up or shut up, like at this point in time. I've got the IUL challenge. I'm willing to pay people if you can prove to me that you can do it. I've had this challenge available for 9 months. I've had 600-something thousand views of the videos, like hundreds of hours of watch time of the videos, and not one agent has been able to step up and do it. So to me, what that tells me, like, oh, why is that? It's either A, they can't do it, or for some, I will say, it is possible if they ran certain assumptions and if they did certain things and set the policy up in a certain way. But even then, chances are, if an agent sells a lot of policies, they've probably got 2 to 5% of their policies that actually perform that way. And they know that what's going to happen is when they show me the one, my next question is going to be like, all right, let's do a full audit. You want to be completely transparent about how these things work? Let's do it. Nobody wants to have that conversation because nobody wants to be transparent because they're all either unaware of what they're doing or they're not being truthful with people. So that's that. That's a lot. That's my response to this point in time. I put a lot of thought into this because I think it's important. You know, the things that he says about why I'm wrong and why he's debunking my position on IUL. Listen, I think if you look at the history, if you look at the actual facts and you get rid of the fact that he has a horse in the race, he's trying to sell IUL, all the agents out there, I don't care who you are, me and my agency, we focus on whole life. Why? Because we believe in it. I used to be an IUL guy. We focus on whole life. Do I have access to IUL carriers? Yes, I do. Will I sell them? No, I won't. Why? Because I don't believe in it. Because I look at it because of all the things I've shared with you in this video. So I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you of anything, but I wanted to present you with the real facts about what's what, how this stuff works, what the history is, what the actual history is, what the regulation is, because most people don't look at that and they don't understand how that impacts everything. So if you have any questions at all, any comments, comment in the comment section below. If you have anything that you need, feel free. I will take your email. I will do my best to respond to every single one. It's simply chris@life180.com. And down in the description below, if you want to talk to somebody on my team, you want to talk, just hit me up. I'm an open book. Anybody with a platform, anybody that is an IUL professional that wants to, that has a platform of 5,000, 10,000 people or more, and you wanna have a debate live, I will debate anybody live on this stuff because I have nothing to hide. I'm 100% transparent. I have my beliefs. You may have your beliefs. And by the way, it's okay, in my opinion, like it's okay for us to disagree and to be able to come together and have a good debate. It's no different than like Peter Schiff and these guys arguing gold versus Bitcoin. It's the same deal. It's a actually very similar correlation. And in this instance, you know, I guess some people would say, oh, well, whole life is the gold and Bitcoin is the IUL and it's enhanced and better and whatever, but it's not that way. It's not that clean. because we're talking about the same companies doing the same stuff, and it's actually a more profitable product. Once again, I'm going to end with this, and I want you to think about this with some common sense. How could a life insurance company pay higher commissions, which they do? This Allianz product that David McKnight likes to sell is one of the highest compensated products on the industry. So how could they pay higher commissions, give you better returns, and have it not be a more profitable product? Just think about that. Take a step back, eliminate your emotional connection to why you want to sell it, eliminate the reasons to, because I get it. I sold IUL for 4 years. I sold a lot of premium, and I had to have a lot of really hard conversations when I realized what I realized about it. So I encourage you, take a step back from what you believe right now and thought to yourself, if what I thought to be true about IUL turned out not to be true, when would I want to know? And go from there. So hope you found value in this. Hope it helped. I'm sure Mr. McKnight, film another video, debunk this one, whatever you want to do. But once again, I come back to this. I challenge you to a debate. Once again, I'll cover the cost. I'll come to you. I'm going to make it really easy for you. I'm not hiding. You came after me. You started this. I'm coming after you. And I'm not going away until you debate me. So and everybody else, and David too, I wish nothing but the best for people. And I believe that when people come around, this industry can do amazing things for a lot of people. And I believe now more than ever, Main Street needs life insurance agents to help them set their financial foundation properly in products where they're not taking on risks like they are with IUL. So that's it. Have a blessed, inspirational day. We'll talk soon.